Liverpool have begun the defence of their Champions League title in reasonably good shape. Despite a 2-0 reverse away to Napoli, 2 wins on the bounce and an upcoming home tie against bottom side in the group Genk should put the Merseyside team in a strong position before they host Napoli and face RB Salzburg away in the final group stage fixture. As these stats from WhiteboardFootball show, Jurgen Klopp's side are, on average, dominating possession, but their free-scoring approach is marred by the concession of 6 goals so far in the group, including 3 at home to an admittedly good Salzburg side. Liverpool have generally stuck with the now preferred 4-3-3, although Klopp will still use a 4-2-3-1 at times, especially if the fullbacks require greater cover. The general pattern is that the midfield 3 stay compact and narrow, ball winning rather than playing too progressively. Width comes from the fullbacks, while the forward line also stay fairly narrow, with Roberto Firmino dropping off to create space and passing opportunities to the wide forwards. Now this is the formation and system most associated with Liverpool, and stylistically, this is usually backed by a concerted press. Klopp has long been a proponent of pressing and counter-pressing, the concerted effort by a team to close down space and win the ball back, especially immediately after losing possession in order to exploit the position and state of the opposition side. Now Liverpool have evolved under Klopp, with 2016-17's more possession-based approach relying on creative passing from players like Adam Lallana and Coutinho to try to spring Sadio Mane forwards, giving way to a more direct style in 2017-18. The arrival of Mohamed Salah was key, allowing Firmino to come inside and orchestrate play from a false 9 position, as was Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's role as a more progressive 8 on the right-hand side of a midfield 3, supporting attacks and assisting a more energetic press. Nonetheless, pressing numbers were high in both seasons, although arguably it wasn't until 2017-18 that Klopp really had a squad who understood his concepts. Then, last season, Liverpool dropped off the press somewhat. The attacking threat of the fullbacks Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson allowed a slightly narrower midfield, with the arrivals of Alisson and Fabinho allowing Liverpool to control the game more and keep a higher defensive line. This did indeed see a reduction in pressing numbers, as measured by passes per defensive action, effectively the number of opposition passes allowed per proactive defensive act. The lower the number, the more proactive the defence is in its pressing. But as we can see, Liverpool are in fact pressing more this season, albeit with a smaller number of games played. While the trend prior to this season for Liverpool was definitely towards a lower intensity of press, although still above league average, this season's Liverpool is once again pressing more. So why the general feeling that they aren't? Compare, for example, the pressing numbers for different fixtures. What's clear here is that arguably Liverpool's worst performance saw them press least, but that otherwise pressing levels are variable. Obviously Liverpool still press more than most teams, but within that there's a real range. Now there are 2 main reasons for this. The first is to protect the fullbacks slightly. While Liverpool were extremely reliant on Robertson and Alexander-Arnold last season for ball progression, in some games the team were caught out with direct passing in behind. They therefore want to control some matches in terms of possession more rather than be direct all the time, another facet of Klopp's evolution, and so here the fullbacks will tend to offer width along the midfield line rather than acting almost as wingers with a defensive responsibility. That means that Liverpool's midfield line is where the pressing happens, and so they will allow the opposition to progress the ball in their own defensive third before engaging the press, rather than looking to choke them higher up the pitch. In other words, Liverpool are pressing more situationally, which at times means that the press is engaged later. The second reason is that Liverpool are currently lacking the sort of midfield who can push up and support attacks in the half spaces. Concerns around the long-term fitness of Naby Keita and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain and the injury to Xherdan Shaqiri have robbed Liverpool of the sort of progressive attacking midfielders that can support attacks where the ball is won higher up the pitch. If Liverpool's fullbacks are hanging back and Firmino is dropping off, there are spaces that would be occupied by on-rushing midfielders to assist the attack. But the more workmanlike setup used by Klopp in many games prevents this. This was clearly seen against Napoli, where a flatter midfield and fullbacks who didn't push up meant that Liverpool's front 3 was quite isolated. With this being so, pressing high and further up the pitch would expose Liverpool's midfield. Now sitting off didn't work well against Napoli, but in games where Liverpool's lack of forward thrusts from midfield could be exposed, Liverpool are more content to block up the middle and press situationally, especially in the wide areas of the middle third, before countering quickly against a defensive line that have pushed up. So, while Liverpool are pressing more overall, they are pressing less in some games. The general trend of the last few seasons might give the impression that Klopp is moving away from his pressing style, but the truth is, he's becoming more discerning in when and how his teams press, on a game-by-game basis.